Meanwhile, let me just sort of broadly ask you, now that we're talking about the ACC, you have the Big East, Conference USA, a bunch of conferences right now juggling. Who's your winner so far in this latest round of realignment theater?
Well, it's not the Sun Belt, Kevin. I can tell you that. They've lost 2 teams already. They could lose another 2 coming up, or at least a third team, depending on what Western Kentucky does. And so there's so much shuffling among those non-power conferences right now. I think that's what we'll see for maybe even the coming months. The Big East could look to add a few more teams out of Conference USA. And so we see this lineage here, like the Big East loses teams, so then they just go to the next conference down, and then that's the way it works. But, right now I'd have to say the ACC, to be honest, I think they weathered the storm pretty well. They kind of rallied their membership a little bit the last 2 weeks after losing Maryland, and now they look like a decently strong conference despite their record against the bigger conferences this year in football. I still think they have a lot of potential with their 3 or 4 top teams, but the problem is you can see, or you can envision, some pairings of ACC teams leaving to go to, say, the SEC. Maybe Duke and UNC would do that one day, or Georgia Tech and Virginia could go to the Big Ten. I mean, the possibilities are scary for the ACC for the future, but if they can keep it all together, they're still a strong conference.
Jeremy Fowler is our college football insider, and he joins us each and every week right here on College Football 360, where we are keeping an eye on college football. I'm Kevin Core. Jeremy, I want to ask you next about the teams that are actually moving over to the Conference USA. We're talking FAU and Middle Tennessee State. You mentioned how the Sun Belt is now struggling because they keep losing members. I'm curious about that Florida second tier of colleges. Everybody knows about Miami, University of Florida, and Florida State. But when you're talking about FAU, FIU, UCF, and USF, it's interesting because those are budding programs. They've had varying degrees of success, and I'm just wondering if you feel like they're all going to end up in the same place.
Well, eventually, if we look at 64 teams in 4 power conferences in, say, 5 or 10 years from now, then I would think even UCF or maybe USF would be left out. I don't know. USF is an attractive market for even the Big Ten, you could argue, being a market in Tampa that they could poach. For the Big Ten and their network, it's all about cable reach and getting the right demographic, the right city for TV ratings.
Good point.
So, Orlando and Tampa are both good spots for that. That might be their only chance to get in a power conference. Right now, the Big East, there are too many moving parts for them to get a television deal done right now, and they desperately need one. Maybe the new commissioner, Mike Oresco, can pull off an upset here, but it's got to be difficult when you don't know who's going to be in your league. They're trying really hard, the officials over there, to stabilize things. But you got to think all those schools in Florida will be on the outside looking in. Even UCF, which would love to be in a bigger conference if they can try to squeeze into the ACC at some point. Maybe if the ACC goes to 16, that could maybe be an option for them. But it's tough pickings right now. It's hard out there for a smaller conference.
Yeah, it really is, and it's interesting because those schools are huge. A lot of people don't realize, 40, 50, 60,000 kids on these campuses.
Yep.
They're gigantic programs. They have a lot of aspirations, but there just may not be a soft landing spot moving forward. They may end up in some sort of a alliance, if you will, down the line. Jeremy Fowler is our college football insider. He's helping us break down all the latest as far as the conference realignment is concerned. Jeremy, last question I have for you on this segment. Which is the next conference, in your opinion, to maybe pick up a team or maybe pick up a couple of other teams? Nobody right now talking about the Pac-12. I'm curious about the Big 12. I keep hearing about the Big 10 maybe grabbing a few more. What's next, my friend? I want you to put on your hat and break out your crystal ball.
Well, if we're going by precedent here, Kevin, I'm going to say the Big 10 is going to go for 2 more and make it a hot 16 for them. I mean, Jim Delaney has an itchy trigger finger right now. We've seen it. He wants to add cable markets. He's going to go after a Georgia Tech, maybe, an attractive market like that, maybe even a Boston College because you're in a hot Eastern Coast area. So I could see them moving before the Big 12, to be honest. Everybody's watching the Big 12 because they have a nice setup with a television package of $2.6 billion that they're splitting 10 ways instead of 12 or 14 ways. Now, I guess if you added a new team, you could tweak your contract to try to get more money involved, but that's no guarantee. We don't know the developments there. So the Big 12 is pretty happy, and that is what could stall expansion to 16 teams for 4 conferences in those super conference deals. Everybody's watching the Big 12. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, they could try to poach a Florida State, which would probably love to go to the Big 12, to be honest, or maybe a Clemson, that's definitely something to watch. All eyes are on them.
Yeah, you make a great point, too. And for the folks at home that don't know, this is not just about specific marketplaces. It's also about time zones. Remember, when you're programming nationally, you want to make sure that the cable operators, East and West, can all say, hey, listen, we need that contract, we need that particular channel, and they have the programming to sustain it, meaning games that kick off in the East Coast time, games that kick off in the Central, and maybe even some out West. Great stuff, Jeremy. As always, we appreciate it. Jeremy Fowler helping us break down the very latest on conference realignment right here on College Football 360. And a reminder, everybody, you can see Jeremy's great work at our website, cbssports.com. He has a fantastic blog over there. Speaking of fantastic, we have a fantastic matchup coming your way this weekend here on cbssports.com. It's the Georgia Bulldogs taking on the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's the SEC Championship game. Our coverage begins at 3:50 Eastern Time, Saturday afternoon. I'll have your pregame show. I'll have your halftime highlights plus scores from around the country on this championship weekend. And, of course, after the game, more highlights and a live report from Gary Danielson, who joins us from the booth at the Georgia Dome. That's Saturday. Be here at cbssports.com.